Years ago, there's a group of us ministers that decided we'd get in a community talent show. And this song was made famous by the Blackwood brothers. And at one time it was in the top 10 records ever sold all time, even in the midst of Elvis and everything. It was such a popular song. And they sang it, you know, as my part in this would be, just a closer walk with me, just a closer walk with thee. And so us, a group of pastors, decided we were going to become a quartet, but we were going to call ourselves the Backwards Brothers. And so we put our suits on backwards, and then we walked out on the stage backwards, and then we sang this song, Just a Closer Walk with Me. So that takes me back, and it sounds like you enjoyed it. When I went to seminary, I went to St. Paul School of Theology, United Methodist Seminary in Kansas City. Just recently, it moved from its inner city setting to the Church of the Resurrection, where Adam Hamilton serves. And many of you have done Hamilton studies and aware of him. But it's moved from where it was and to now to that big campus at the Church of the Resurrection. When I arrived there 40 years ago or so, we had gotten a new president. The president's name was Bill McAvaney, and as he was being welcomed on campus and we were being welcomed on campus, we heard the story of how he was recruited as a president. You see, they had received more than 100 applicants who were wanting to become president of the school. And as they were sorting those out and decided on five candidates that they felt would be the best choice in serving as president, one of the search committee members had suggested an unusual and interesting way of interviewing or finding out which one would be best as a president. And what he suggested was that we would send somebody to each of the institutions where these people were serving. And what their job was to do when they were on campus was to go and to interview the janitor. And to really find out what this person was like. And when those people, so they decided that was an incredibly great idea. It was incredibly, and so they did. They sent 5 people out to these institutions, and they sought out the janitor, and they just asked questions about this person that they were seeking to be president. And what happened is the one person that went where President McAvaney was that his references were so glowing from this janitor that they decided this is the one. He was the one. So Bill McAvaney was hired from the references from the janitor of the institution where he had worked before. And what we found out as students with President McAvaney was that he was just a regular guy. And that whether you would come to schools sometimes and he would be holding the ladder as the janitor was changing the light bulbs in the school. Or he would be out there early as we were coming in, sweeping off the snow, off the sidewalks at times. Or you would be sitting in the student center and he would come in and sit with us with his sleeves rolled up and drink coffee with us, just wanting to know about what was going on in our lives and thanking us for choosing St. Paul. He was an incredible person, and what was so incredible, I later on got involved with student government and was the secretary for our student government. And as we met with him, whether you were a janitor, a student, whether you're a professor, or some dignitary who was visiting on campus, he saw everybody as a VIP. Everybody as a VIP, as if they were very important people. His idea of greatness was whether you were one who was there to serve as a janitor, you were just as important as he was as the president. This morning, as we look at the gospel lesson in Mark, Jesus teaches us about greatness. Mark says they went on from there and they passed through Galilee. And remember this, Jesus did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples and saying to them, the Son of Man, which Jesus is referring to himself, is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And 3 days after being killed, he will rise again. But the disciples did not understand what he was saying. and were afraid to ask him. Then they came to Capernaum. Capernaum is on the coast of the Sea of Galilee. And when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for they had argued with one another who was the greatest. He sat down and called the 12, the disciples, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." In other words, if you want to be great, you must become a servant. And then he took a little child and put it among them, and then raising that child up in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." Amen. They did not understand what they were saying. It was very clear that they did not understand, because after Jesus, as I said the last couple of weeks, this particular part of Mark is the pinnacle part of the gospel. As Jesus is moving from performing the miracles and teaching in among the hills and among the villages and healing the people, that his eyes now are set on Jerusalem, where a cross is waiting for him. And so we see that he is off on the wayside, and what he is wanting is to get away from the crowds and spend this time with the disciples, to huddle them together and to give them this lesson that they must know and remember. That the Son of Man, that Jesus will be betrayed into the hands of evil people, and they will kill him. But 3 days later, he will rise. That's the gospel lesson. That is what the gospel is all about. It's all about the crucifixion and the resurrection, and that's what he was wanting to get across in these last days that he was spending with his disciples, that inner circle. But it says they did not understand. They did not understand. But they didn't stop to question Jesus, "What are you saying?" But what we have in this message is that they began arguing over who was the greatest. Who was the greatest? And we don't have an idea what that conversation would have been like, but I can imagine what it was like. I can imagine Simon Peter saying, "Well, I'm the greatest, of course. I'm the spokesman of this group. After all, I am part of that inner circle, and I'm just the strongest and the best of all of you. And I, therefore, am the greatest of all of you." Or Andrew, Peter's brother, said, "Hey, wait a minute, bro. Wait a minute, bro. Who was it that called you to be here? You know, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me. I went, and I was the first disciple. Therefore, I am the greatest and the best. I am number one. And you wouldn't be here if I hadn't gone back home and said, 'Peter, you got to come and see this. You got to come.' So you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me. I am number one." Well, then I can imagine James and John, the sons of thunder, as they said, "Well, you guys just don't get it. You don't get it. You should listen to Jesus, because he's the greatest. He's talking about sacrifice. If you want to talk about sacrifice and being great, nobody sacrificed like we have. There we were with our father Zebedee and his prosperous fishing business, and we literally dropped our nets right before our very father's eyes and walked away from what could be a great business. We walked away from it all to follow Jesus, and we are the greatest because we gave up more than anybody here." And then Matthew gets involved. "You want to talk about sacrifice? You guys have forgotten that I was a tax collector. I had more money than all of you put together. You want to talk about sacrifice? I left that good job and I left everything to follow Jesus. If anybody's number one, it's me." Well, I can imagine that Jesus is hearing all of this as he's walking along, and they're back there talking about who the greatest was. Some of the best ways that I learned about what was going on in our kids' lives was when I was driving and they were in the back seat. And I was pretending like I was driving, but I had my ears open listening to what they were talking about. And I know that Jesus must have been listening too. Because when he got to Capernaum and they got to the house, he said, "Hey, what were you guys arguing about back there? He knew what they were arguing about, but they got quiet. Just like our kids got quiet. What are you guys talking about? Nothing! They were ashamed. And so then Jesus, to demonstrate what real greatness was, took a child, probably a child off the street there in Capernaum, and put it among us. And we're not sure why Mark says this, but set the child there in front of them, as if wanting to show them how small this child was. And then he lifts them up and holds him. He says, anyone who welcomes this child welcomes me. And if you welcome me, it's not me that you welcome. It's really your Father in heaven that you welcome. And that is what greatness is all about. The little one. We have a world that measures greatness by fame and fortune and wealth. We have a culture that has figured out greatness by power and wealth and fame. On Wednesday night, I didn't have the chance to watch the debates. I got caught up here in church, and it was about 10:30 when I got home. And when I got there, I got to see the reviews. And they were interviewing people about the debate that was going on. And I found one that was interesting. And don't take me wrong about this. It was a young woman that was asked by a reporter, what did you think of the debates? And she didn't say anything about the issues or which one was the better debater or anything like that, and didn't name one of them. But what she said was, there wasn't a lot of humility there. And there wasn't a lot. And I said, I'm going to use that Sunday, because I don't like to bring politics up. But I thought what was interesting is the one person that got the biggest laugh of the whole bunch was when they were asked what their code name would be of the Secret Service. What their code name would be of the Secret Service. And the one that got the biggest laugh was when they said, well, I want my code name to be humble. And the crowd just broke up in a roar. I won't tell you who was it that said that, because I don't want to get in trouble with any of you. But humility is a challenge, and we can see by the disciples that they were struggling with that themselves. They were struggling with humility themselves, and we too struggle with that. But it's an important virtue of being like a child, of humbling ourselves to welcome a child. You know, when Jan Hoover puts out a plea for help in Vacation Bible School or Sunday School or Wednesday night programming and asking for people to help with children, when we read this scripture, we should be having people standing in line wanting to be a part of helping the children of our church so that they come first, that kids come first here. And that we want to experience what Jesus is talking about. When we welcome a child, we welcome Jesus. How important that is. Albert Schweitzer was asked, the great Dr. Albert Schweitzer was asked, who's the greatest person in the world? And Albert said, well, I don't know, but it's probably some common person somewhere in the world who's demonstrating love. The greatness really doesn't come because of my name or fame, the money I have, or the power that I hold. According to Jesus, the greatness comes in our ability to care for the least of these. Wednesday night, as we were getting ready for our Wednesday night activities, just before supper was about ready to be served, we had a homeless man who came to visit us, and as I was visiting with him, I got pulled aside, and someone needed to talk to me, and I was gone for about an hour. But when I came back, I was worried about what happened to Kenneth. And I came back, and in amongst this congregation somebody had made sure that he was welcomed, that he had some food. He hadn't eaten all day, that's what I knew. And that he was sitting in the table with a group of people and a part of that congregation, or that conversation in that table, and it really touched me. And as I was walking down to go check on Kenneth to see how he was doing, and he had nothing, somebody put a $20 bill in my pocket and said, "Hey, give this to that guy. He really needs it. But don't tell anybody who it came from." You guys did a wonderful thing in making sure this man was fed, that he was welcomed and taken care of. And that is what true greatness is. That's what Jesus was talking about. You see, what he was talking to the disciples was the ultimate love, gift of love of all, that he said, I'm going to go to Jerusalem. And there are going to be some really hateful people that are going to arrest me. I'm going to be betrayed by one of you, and I'm going to be hung on a cross. And I'm going to be raised from the dead. That is what the birth of Christianity was upon that cross. And when we look upon that cross, that is how we realize what real humanity is. Humility is one would humble themselves to die for us. Why? Because he loves us. Because he cares about us. And that is our hope, and that is our hope that we would be more like Christ. To welcome the least of these. As Jesus picked up the child and blessed the child, let us bless the children of this church and all who enter it. For when we welcome them, we welcome Jesus. Let us pray. Gracious and heavenly God, we come to you mindful that every time we see a cross, we're reminded of you, and may we be reminded of your love and of your sacrifice. For that is truly greatness. And may we share our love and sacrifice our time so that others may know of your love. And may we welcome the children around us. Amen.